thank you all so much for coming here tonight. I'm very happy to provide some information about the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services and specifically the SCALE program that we have here. I'm very excited to share all this information and to address any questions that you may have. So I'm going to share my screen now. And as Wendy mentioned, please put your questions in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them as they come up or at any time that you think might be most appropriate. So, please don't hesitate to ask questions here. So I'm going to share my screen and get my presentation rolling here. Well, again, thank you all so much. So just wanted to talk a bit about the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services first. It's an amazing program that has developed on Rutgers University campus and presently consists of 3 active groups that are under the umbrella of the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services. The Supporting Community Access Through Leisure and Employment Program, which will be the primary focus of this conversation tonight, will be what I'm talking about mostly. But just to give you guys a brief overview of our administrative structure, so you understand how the programs work, there are 3 separate programs. First, the SCALE program, of which I'm the director. And then there are 2 other programs that are open and operating. The College Support Program, which is overseen by Courtney Butler, which is a program for matriculated Rutgers University college students who were admitted into Rutgers on their own academic volition and also happen to have a diagnosis of autism. So the College Support Program provides supports to assist these college students to succeed on Rutgers University campus. For those of you that know Rutgers, it's a massive campus with spans 2 cities and has its own bus system, its own police force, 70,000 undergraduate students. So it's a very large campus. So needless to say, it's overwhelming for anybody to be in a circumstance where they have to manage Rutgers, let alone potentially someone with autism. So the College Support Program helps to ease that transition and provides ongoing supports. The Psychological Services Clinic is another division of the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services, which provides psychological evaluations, consultation, and talk therapies for individuals on the autism spectrum. This is a first of its kind of a clinic dedicated specifically to these types of therapies and also diagnostics and other norm referenced evaluations for adults on the autism spectrum. And that's overseen by Dr. Vanessa Ball, who is the Karmazin Lillard Chair in Adult Autism here at the Graduate School of Applied Professional Psychology at Rutgers University. Being a part of Rutgers University, we have great opportunities to work with clinical faculty in the field of applied behavior analysis and other psychological disciplines. And our whole program is overseen by Dr. Christopher Menende, the Executive Director of the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services. The 4th division of the RCAAS, which is not presently open, but we anticipate opening towards the end of this year, is our intensive outpatient clinic, which will be a clinic specifically for adults on the autism spectrum who are in behavioral crisis, self-injurious behavior, aggressive behaviors, requiring interventions to help reduce those behaviors in a number of settings, whether it be at work, their home, and the clinic will be there to evaluate and provide treatment plans for these individuals. So to the content of what we're going to be talking mostly about tonight is the SCALE program. So what is SCALE? SCALE is an acronym. Like at Rutgers, everything is an acronym at Rutgers, the RCAAS SCALE program. It stands for Supporting Community Access Through Leisure and Employment. As I mentioned before, it's one of the 4 divisions of the RCAAS. And as Wendy mentioned, it's the flagship program, meaning that when the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services first started, it was the SCALE program. So there was basically our program, which was a 12-month community-based program, which supports individuals on the autism spectrum, age 21 plus, to improve outcomes of independent living. So the unique thing about this program is the community-based focus on it. So for those of you maybe that have an individual who is an adult on the autism spectrum or or has a child that's aging out, you may or may not be familiar, but there are after school, when the school years end for an individual on the spectrum and they age into adulthood. Adult programs are there's a couple different kinds of them. You may be familiar with your supported employment sites, such as like an ARC of Somerset, where maybe there's some community-based work, there's sheltered workshops, and then there's also congregate type day programs where individuals go, and it's basically school 2.0, where adults go to the same place every day. There's some community integration, there's some skills being worked on, but it's not it's the SCALE program is unique from those programs in that our program takes place completely in community-based settings. And we work on a number of different areas, but the primary focuses that we have are on employment, because outcomes for adults are typically shown to be not great across a lot of areas of employment, developing and sustaining relationships, physical and mental wellness. And a lot of that is tied to the ability to obtain and maintain employment, because with employment, you can start to make money on your own. You can create networks of new people that you can interact with at work. You have money, so maybe you could think about starting to wanting to live on your own. So from employment comes a lot more opportunities to improve on those outcomes that are, not so great for adults on the spectrum. But we also take a good look at focusing on appropriate leisure, because a lot of our participants and a lot of folks on the spectrum don't have, functional leisure skills. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is like leisure, while it's supposed to be something you enjoy and you love to do, a lot of the times you have to learn to love things. It takes time, it takes effort. For example, I play guitar. Learning to play guitar was difficult and challenging, but for me, it's a leisure opportunity at this time in my life, because I became fluent, and I use this now as something that I want to, I look to do. But again, leisure isn't always something that is explicitly taught, because when kids are in school, we're learning about, maybe more important things like developing functional communication systems, maybe reducing problem behavior, developing independent living skills, which is all well and good. But sometimes we need to also take a look at how do we develop leisure skills. We also look at some barriers to what individuals need to access their community, and transportation is one of them. We've done a lot of travel training with our participants using different types of public transportation. One of the limitations of the SCALE program is that we do not provide transportation. So we work with families to either, try to find appropriate means of transportation, whether that's utilizing their budget to access transportation services through maybe a car service, Uber. Some of our participants take the train, some of them use public buses, and some are maybe learning to drive on their own. The unique thing about SCALE is that we support individuals on the autism spectrum with all different levels of support needs. So for those of you familiar with the DDD system, it's a tiered system for support. So a tier A is a person that has lower support needs, and along with that, it becomes a smaller budget. But those are folks that maybe have a college degree, they have a driver's license, they have a job, they have a place that they live on their own, but they have some social relationship issues, which is something else we work on. And we support individuals all along their tiers up to a person who is a tier E with acuity, which means that there's probably, their autism is profound. They have comorbid intellectual disabilities. They have limited vocal or effective communication systems. So we provide all of these supports in those community-based settings, which is unique and challenging at times because the SCALE program, applied behavior analysis program. So for those of you familiar, ABA is a branch of psychology which evaluates systematically evaluates environmental factors that affect our behavior. So we oftentimes look at interfering behaviors and we assess and develop interventions based on our observations. And we also use this to teach skill acquisition programs, for those that maybe don't have certain skill sets, whether they be social skills or they be vocational skills or adaptive skills. The thing that's unique and challenging is that this is done in really, truly community-based settings on a Rutgers University campus. So for those of you that are familiar with ABA is typically something where, as a science, we like to be precise, we like to be exact, and we like to have controlled settings within which we're evaluating our interventions, because we like to point specifically to what the reason for our behavior change is. In a controlled setting, like a school or a classroom or maybe even a clinic setting, you have a little bit more control over those variables that are extraneous. But when you go out into the real world, you can't control for a lot of what's happening in the community. You can't control for that blaring car horn. You can't control for the air conditioner being broke in the work site today. You can't control for them not having pepperoni pizza, and that can cause a problem for an individual. But the thing about fully community-based settings that helps us is that there's a lot of salient stimuli within those environments that help us to program for those specific environments within which our participants regularly engage with. And that helps to promote generalization of skills as well. One of the biggest issues that we have in applied behavior analysis is when we teach something in a very controlled setting, there's often difficulties in generalizing that skill to a more natural environment. So being within community-based environments, it's really helpful to help break down that barrier of the ability for a person to perform a skill in the location within which it occurs, which often leads to really great outcomes in competitive employment for our participants. On the Rutgers University campus and beyond, we have a number of different employment partners that we've worked with very closely to develop, environments within which our participants can engage in meaningful, paid, gainful work, and also to develop skills. One of the biggest things that we always preach to our employment partners is that we do not look for handouts or charity in the employment sites that we get. We want our individuals to go out to these sites and work as hard and as independently as they possibly can, completing a job which is actually needed. And being on Rutgers University campus, in addition to having all these different, campuses and this bus system and this infrastructure, there's a lot of work too. And just to have a list of just a couple of our employment partners here, we have individuals that work at the golf course. We have a person that works for Rutgers football, mail services, dining services, student affairs, the libraries, the Inning Conference Center, and then a couple of sites that are off campus. Better Way Supply Chain Logistics is a partner of ours that does supply chain logistics for beverages. So they do beverage distribution and repackaging. Capacity is like an Amazon fulfillment center that does cosmetics. Thomas Sweet, if you guys are familiar with New Brunswick, or Thomas Sweet, but Thomas Sweet is a great ice cream and chocolate place that a participant of ours works at and does really well. And we also are working to collaborate and provide work opportunities through Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Health. There's a number of different work opportunities at the hospitals as well. And the cool thing about being a part of Rutgers University is there's no limit to the different types of work that we can find. Even for individuals that have maybe more pointed interests or maybe have academic aspirations, there's the possibility to work within one of the academic departments as well. We have lots of folks that are open and willing to this amazing program that we have. So for us, there's no limit to the types of employment that you can have, as long as you have the opportunity to practice those skills within the environment with which the specific skills that you need to learn are being done. And also through the relationships that we develop with these employment partners. A lot of the work that's done that allows for these opportunities is the partnerships that we create and the work that's done. And being on campus, there's so many different work opportunities, which is a real strong argument for having a campus-based program such as the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services SCALE program. So just a little bit of information about our participants. We're presently supporting 20 adults on the autism spectrum, all age 21 plus. They all have a primary diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. And as I discussed before, there are varied support needs, and we have a very diverse demographic backgrounds. One of the biggest missions in being a part of Rutgers University is our dedication to improving outcomes of equity and inclusion on the Rutgers University campus for neurodiverse populations such as autistic adults. So we're looking at not only gender, age, ethnicity, and religion, which are primary measures that we use for identifying our diversity, but we're also looking at things like in bolstering the number of folks that have higher support needs, taking a look at the ages of individuals and supporting individuals that are maybe a bit older, looking at the discrepancy between women and men on the autism spectrum. There's not as many supports or research out there for specifically women, just because women are generally underrepresented in the numbers of folks with autism. Recently, we accepted 4 new participants who started just this week. Actually, today was the first day, and I see one of our wonderful new parents is in the audience today. It's hi there. But so it's really exciting that our program, even in COVID and all these weird things that have been going on from a greater perspective of the world, we were still able to continue to grow our program. Prior to COVID, we had 12 participants, and in 2020, 2021, we accepted 4, and then we just recently accepted 4 more individuals, bringing our number up to 20 adults being supported by SCALE, which is very exciting for us. So oftentimes people ask questions about how we're funded. So we are an approved provider through the New Jersey Department of Developmental Disabilities Medicaid-based fee-for-service program. For those of you in adult services already, you're familiar with this. For those of you that maybe has an individual aging out and getting closer to adulthood, upon getting closer to graduation, you should work with your Division of Special Services or your case managers within the school to, if this is in the cards for you and your family, to apply for the Division of Developmental Disabilities and Medicaid to become approved to be a part of one of the two programs that they offer, the supports program or the community care program, because that will open you up the ability to qualify for a budget to access services from different providers. We're also approved through the Division of Vocational and Rehabilitative Services, or DVRS, in New Jersey. While we are equipped to accept private pay, we primarily accept pay through these channels. So just talking a bit more about the RCAAS and what our goals are, we have a three-pronged mission, which are in line with many of the tenets of Rutgers University being a Division I research facility. In addition to the sports, we're also a Division I research facility. But our three-pronged mission is that of service, training, and research. So service, in that we provide a number of different support services which are aligned with the community care programs and the supports programs informed by the Department of Developmental Disabilities Medicaid-based fee-for-service system. We're an ABA program, so we provide regular behavioral supports, and we provide a number of different support services for people. But these are the primary supports that we provide in line with the manuals that are out there for the funding sources through DDD. Primarily what we try to do is get people working, so supported employment is a big one, but we may be doing pre-vocational supports or individual or community-based supports for individuals that aren't working all the time. Because sometimes the goal is, hey, I don't want to work every day. I just want to work part-time. Do we have participants that work full-time? Yes, we do. And that's their goal. But the one thing about the SCALE program is that we try to take a completely individualized approach to each participant that not only meets the needs for them to be as independent as possible, but also balances their right to have choice in their programming and also to maintain and lead a life that they're happy with and their choice. And if that individual can't necessarily vocally communicate, then we work closely with that individual and those closest to the individual to come up with a team approach to how we can get to that point for that person. Our second pronged mission of training is related to being a part of Rutgers University. We have the very fortunate ability to provide structured training opportunities across a number of different academic disciplines. So our program, the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services, is based out of the Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology. So we do a lot of work in behavior analysis and applied psychology in the form of internships and field work. But we also have great relationships with the School of Social Work, Marketing and Communication, and Occupational Therapy interns. The idea being that we are providing opportunities for individuals in a number of different disciplines to have a field experience working specifically with adults on the autism spectrum. There's no specific line of training or coursework that prepares people for working in adult services and autism. And we're trying to turn that around a bit to create a professional training system that allows people to have field experiences and understand what it's like to work with adults on the autism spectrum, something that's much needed for our future professionals. And finally, our third prong of research. We do a lot of research because for adults specifically, there's not a ton out there that supports what interventions should be used to improve outcomes, what strategies we should apply to be most efficient in teaching skills to people. There's a lot of research out there for younger children on the autism spectrum, but we still need to do a lot of work in creating best practice for adults on the autism spectrum. So if you could see some of the things that we look at here, pedestrian safety, this is a street crossing study that we're doing, treatment of food selectivity, because guess what? When you turn 21, doesn't mean that your son or daughter becomes less selective with the food choices they have. We've done some work in looking at adults and their food selectivity, because more variety in foods can lead to healthier physical wellness outcomes and extend quality of life. And stuff related to how we train our staff, how we work with our participants to do better in interviews, write better emails, being safe in the community, and much, much more. We're constantly working with the faculty of a number of different academic backgrounds and disciplines, and really trying to bolster our research base to help improve outcomes for adults on the spectrum. So just wanted to briefly go over the admissions process for Scale. I know a lot of people are probably curious about what is it like? How do I get in? Is there a waiting list? So the there's no waiting list. It's not a chronological kind of thing where it's first come, first serve. Every year we have an open application process, and that application process, is to allow for people to have an equal chance to get into the program each time. So our typical criteria for getting, applying to the program is that you have a diagnosis of autism, you're age 21 plus, and that you're approved through one of those state programs through the Department of Developmental Disabilities and Medicaid. And we take a lot of applications. So typically when we have our open enrollment period, the applications are open for 2 weeks, and we get a lot of interest in our program. And we typically accept between 2 to 4 participants per cycle. But the process for us going through is to get people fill out a paper. Well, it's not paper, it's online, it's all done on computers, but people fill out their application, and all of those folks that apply for the program, we go through and we apply a rubric. So again, with the idea that we're trying to create a really diverse group of autistic adults that we support, we have a strategic admissions team and a guiding, what do you call that? Advisory panel that develops a strategic admissions plan each year to determine specific profiles of individuals that we're looking to add to our program in an effort to create a diverse environment within Scale. So once we have that, broken down for us by our advisory panel and our executive panel, we accept applications, and we run all those applications through a rubric to score them to show which individuals best meet those profiles. From there, we notify people and determine, from those groups, we take the top 20% of those people, and then we have them do an interview with us so we can go face to face with the person, see what they look like, ask specific questions tailored to, questions that we had on the application. And then from there, we will carefully review all of that information from interviews, and then we will make another decision as to who will move on to the next phase and who will not. The people that are selected to move on to the next phase are brought in to complete in-person work samples, and they may be volunteering at a particular employment site just for a day. So we can just get a better understanding of what skill sets and task preferences they have to help us make a more informed decision. And then we send out our decision notice, to let you know if you're accepted or if you were not accepted. But regardless of if you're accepted or not, you're provided with a copy of all the evaluations that we conducted, so you can at least have them for your records. It's a long process, and it's one that we take a lot of care in doing. And and the one parent who's on this panel can attest to the fact that it's a very long process, but it's deliberate, not deliberately. It turns out to be so long because we painstakingly go through every single participant, because when we're accepting an individual into the SCALE program, we're committing to a lifetime of supports for that person. We're committing to being with them until they choose to either leave the program or move into retirement, because there's no aging out of adult programs, which makes it really unique, and also emphasizes why it's such a process for us to accept individuals into the program. But, we hope that we're going to continue to grow the SCALE program on Rutgers campus, and hopefully accept more individuals into the program. We just admitted our 4 new participants. So if anybody is interested in more information about applying to SCALE, you could check out our website here. I can copy these links and put them in the chat as well for anybody. You can email me. That's my email there, jmayer@rcaas.rutgers.edu. Your best bet, though, would be reaching out to this first website here, and then you could sign up for our mailing list and be notified as to when we're going to be opening our admission cycle. And then finally, just a quick shameless plug here. I am doing a webinar through the Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology professional development website. It's entitled Matching Vocational Aptitude and Employment Choices, Ethical Practice in Vocational Assessments for Adults on the Autism Spectrum. I'll also copy this link in there. If there's anybody that you know that's a professional, or if you'd like to know more about some of the research that we're doing at the RCAAS and learn how we go about identifying appropriate vocational opportunities for our individuals, I would encourage you to consider checking this out and signing up for the webinar. And that's pretty much all I have for everyone. So And that's pretty much all the content I have. So I'm happy to take any questions. I have the chat box up here, so feel free to ask.
Okay. Jim, I'm not sure if you can see what I'm seeing in the chat, but we got a few questions.
Oh, okay.
Here. One person asked why you only accept 20 people a year.
Got it. Great. That's a good question. So we don't accept 20 a year. We've accepted 20 since the program started back in 2017. And the reason for that is the SCALE program operates not based on what the funding that's offered through the state allows us to provide service, but what an individual can accomplish given optimal supports. So we often operate at a deficit. So we are using doing a lot of work, getting grant funding to support what we're doing, reaching out to people and trying to, solicit philanthropy to keep our program running. Because again, we're trying to create a model here that hopefully can be replicated by other folks, and hopefully to make a case for the fact that optimal supports are going to lead to better outcomes for folks as justification for this is why you need to provide better resources for adult service providers. Now, being a part of Rutgers, and we have the opportunity to get different sources of funding, but one of the concerns that we have is at the end of the day, we have to, be fiscally responsible, and we need to be able to keep our boat afloat. So part of the thing that we're hoping to do, or that we're being charged to do by the university, is to try to become as sustainable on just the DDD funds that we receive at this time, which which is difficult. So for us, we're not able to add a lot of participants in one shot, because we need to do it in a systematic way that shows that we're decreasing our deficit and becoming less reliant on external sources of funding beyond where our participants are funded for. So we're doing it in a systematic way to make sure that we can be sustainable for a long period of time. I hope that answered your question.
All right. Someone else asked, how many times can someone apply, and what are the application times, like each semester?
Yeah, so you can apply any number of times. There's no limits to the amount of times you can apply. And, I oftentimes at the end of the admission cycles, when I have to send those very hard letters to folks saying like, I'm sorry, you weren't accepted this time. It's never a reflection on the individual as doing something wrong, or there's something that it's just a capacity thing. We have every application that we go through. Like, I could accept any single person that applies for the SCALE program because they all have a very specific need. It's just a matter of our ability to accept enough people to ensure that we're doing things in a fiscally responsible way. The second part of that question, I'm sorry, Wendy, can you repeat that part for me?
Sure. What are the application times? Like
right.
Semester?
Yep. So we try to open admissions annually. COVID kind of messed up that schedule that we had because, times to interview people, it took longer for us trying to hire people. For example, we admitted 4 new participants. We needed to expand our staffing as well. It takes a while to identify people, but typically we have the admissions open up towards like the end of the spring semester. So typically around May, maybe into June, with the idea that we're going to go through that admissions process and hopefully admit folks into our program by, the fall, winter time to have them start. Because again, going through every single application, going through all of our interviews, our work samples, it's a timely procedure, but a necessary one. So we typically open it for 2 weeks in that late spring, early summertime, with the hopes that someone will start in the fall, winter time.
Okay. And another question is, what is the biggest difference between the SCALE program and the CPS program?
The college support program, right. So the college support program is for individuals that have gotten into Rutgers University as students. So out of high school, they applied to Rutgers University just like I did. They got into Rutgers University on their own academic merit. So these are students that might be 18, 19, 20 years old, or maybe 21. The SCALE program is specifically for individuals on the spectrum age 21 plus, so those in adulthood. So you tend to see that the folks in SCALE are pardon me, are individuals that have probably relative to the college students on campus, they may have more support needs than those individuals. So these are folks that, maybe they did go to college, but, they're having a really, really hard time finding a job and they need additional supports. Or maybe these are folks that have more profound intellectual disabilities and were in the high school system up till they were 21. Those are the populations of autistic adults that the SCALE program primarily oversees. Another primary difference between the two is that the SCALE program is a fully therapeutic program in that we provide ABA therapies for our participants. The college support program is not a therapeutic program. It's a peer mentorship model where basically there's coordinators of the college support program that works with other Rutgers University students that volunteer as peer mentors, and they provide, they help those individuals acclimate to the campus life by having a point person on campus, which is another student who happens to be a peer and basically meets with that person, is their best friend on campus, just to help them sort of break down those walls. But it's not a therapeutic program like the SCALE program in that they're not doing systematic approaches to developing and improving outcomes. It's more meant to be like helping you to adjust to college life.
All right. And we have another question. Can you describe what a program would look like for a profoundly autistic nonverbal individual?
Yeah. So the processes that we go through is we like to get a full idea of what an individual hopes to do, hopes to achieve, and hopes to, realize as an adult. And for an individual that's profoundly impaired, that maybe doesn't have the ability to advocate for themselves or the ability to communicate their long-term goals and dreams, we rely on several sources of data to help inform those decisions and help to find, appropriate community-based opportunities for that individual. So we may work with the families or maybe the support providers that are in homes or maybe the residential group. And we'll work with them to identify what are the things that seem most important to this individual. We do a lot of behavioral observation and assessment and evaluation to determine preferences across a number of different things. So we start off with a lot of reinforcer assessments to identify what are things that individuals like, what do they gravitate towards, whether it be a specific type of food or a video, or maybe monetary, they want to work for money so they can purchase things. And we evaluate and assess what items or activities may be most valuable. And we also take a similar approach to evaluating what preferences are from vocational, adaptive, and leisure approaches as well. So we utilize assessments such as the assessment of functional living skills, which is it's an instrument that was developed by some behavior analysts, where basically it's an observational approach to identifying what tasks individuals do well with and which ones they need help with. And that helps us to develop our instructional programming to teach those folks. We also have a vocational assessment, which I'll be speaking to on that webinar that I shared with everybody, where we developed a way to understand what types of jobs individuals may be good at. When I say jobs, I mean work jobs, like getting paid for. What types of jobs individuals may be good at based on their preferences and their performance, and also any interfering behavior. So for a person that can't necessarily communicate, like, hey, I hate this job, that might manifest another way. Maybe there'll be more pronounced agitation behaviors. Maybe they'll be, less likely to be on task. Maybe they won't perform that task well. We have a way of determining that, how will they do given certain jobs based on what they choose to do. So we work on developing what's called a vocational profile, where we evaluate what are key components of the job. Do you like to work with other people, or do you like to work by yourself? Pick. Do you like to work on tasks that seem more repetitive, or do you like to do tasks that are more complex? Pick. Do you like to do jobs where you're stationary, or do you like to do jobs where you're moving around a lot? Pick. And we use those observations and those scenarios. It's basically like a preference assessment for types of jobs, and we develop a vocational profile. So then we could say, okay, Billy chose to work alone on repetitive tasks while sitting still. So what are jobs that match that profile? And then we can go and look at the different types of jobs that are available to us and put the individual in those jobs. And then it doesn't stop there. Then we start to evaluate, okay, when they're in this job, What are their levels of interfering behaviors? How on task are they? How often do they choose to go to this job as well? And we use all those sources of data for those, especially that can't communicate, as evidence to say, like, hey, we're seeing lower levels of interfering behavior, we're seeing higher levels of on task behavior, and this individual chooses this job regularly, which gives us maybe not a full confirmation, but a good, strong case for saying that this is a good match for this person. And then we can pursue that line of work and then identify skills that need to be taught within those settings and hopefully grow that person's program to make them as independent as possible given that activity.
All right. Here's another question. Are you providing outreach to any other regions in the state or in assisting in replicating your model with other providers?
Presently, there are no active collaborations with other groups, but we are in the process of, since the SCALE program has started, or RCAAS has started even before I was a part of the program, developing this model and writing this model out for publication with the idea that we will have a breakdown for how this program was structured and developed, and also present data related to longitudinal outcomes for participation in the SCALE program. So one of the other divisions, the Psychological Services Clinic, which I mentioned earlier, we work with them as well throughout our admissions process to evaluate, scores, quantitative scores for different areas of functioning and to determine, like, are improvements occurring as a result of being a part of the SCALE program. So there'll be intelligence quotient, adaptive skills, functional skills, leisure skills, social skills, vocational skills. We'll evaluate all of these in a quantifiable way using empirically validated instruments and psychological instruments, and then checking in with those assessments again to see, like, what is the progress of this individual on through these different psychological instruments, to say, like, hey, being a part of a program that provides optimal supports, provides regular employment, and provides individual instruction results in better outcomes for this adult. And then that will be sort of the evidence that we need to support, like, this is why this model is important, that we take a proactive approach to funding before it all goes, badly. And then hopefully by proactively investing in these people, we can improve outcomes for them. And then subsequently change the outcomes that are kind of published as, like, not being optimal for autistic adults. I hope that answers your question. So no, we don't have active collaborations, but the goal is that we will be able to publish our model and that other folks will be able to adopt it and use it in their program development.
Okay, here's another question. Can you describe a typical day both in and outside of the center?
Sure. So many of our participants, they have a number of different living arrangements. Some of them live in supported living environments, such as a group home or a residential, supported apartment. Some live at home with their families. But typically what we try to do is an individual will come to our program. Our program operates 12 months out of the year. So we're a 12-month program. We have our closures for the holidays and things like that. But it's a 12-month program that typically operates between the hours of 9 and 3. That being said, we're a very individualized program. So if a person has a work opportunity that's at night, for example, we have someone who works the night shift at Rutgers Dining. We support him from the hours of 3 to 9, so it can be flexible based on what the individual's opportunities are. But typically the way that our participants work is we have a brand new community center on Rutgers campus, which is really beautiful and has a lot of great fun activities. But a lot of our participants don't even go there. They go right to work typically, or maybe they'll come to the center as like a check-in and then they'll touch base there and then they'll go to work and they'll be out in the community all day. But opportunities range for individuals depending on what their needs are. We have participants that come to work and then they choose to go to the library and do some volunteer work at the library. So one individual will, he'll look at the books on the stacks in the library, and he has a volunteer opportunity through them where he helps organize those books. Then he'll go to the gym and he'll spend some time in the gym working out at one of the Rutgers gyms. And then he'll go to work in the afternoon from like 12 to 3. He works at Red Pine Pizza, which is a pizza place where he makes pizzas and does general, cleaning activities there. That's one person's profile. We may have an individual that says, I don't want to work every single day. I want a day of rec and leisure. And maybe that person's day of rec and leisure is like a full day of rec and leisure. And that can involve things like, going to the gym, going to the libraries. There's a movie theater on campus. We have a bus system, so we can take buses to get to any other campus-based opportunity. So we can do any of those things. There's restaurants. There's lots of different things that we could do, and we have access to downtown New Brunswick as well. So we may have, individualized schedules based on that person's preferences, or maybe what some of the outcomes are that we need to work on with them. I don't know if that's helpful, but basically we try to take an approach that's completely individualized to what the person and the team around that person finds to be the most salient and most important goals for them. So we hope that there can be a balance of work, leisure, recreation, and social skills that we can embed within those activities on campus.
All right. The next question is, once the person gets a primary diagnosis of autism, are they prescribed a certain medication for autism? And also, I was wondering when the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services began.
So first question related to the diagnosis of autism. So some individuals choose to, seek out pharmacological, interventions or medications, and some of them may be necessary for other comorbid disorders. But there isn't like a medication saying like this is for your autism. There's not one specific thing that's like universally prescribed to autistic adults. Some individuals may take antipsychotic medications because of the presentation of problem behavior, or maybe different types of other types. If there's a comorbid seizure disorder, they may be on a seizure disorder medication, but there's not a specific pill that's like for like, hey, you're diagnosed autism, this is your medication. Some folks on the autism spectrum don't take medication at all, and that's a choice between that individual, their family, and their healthcare providers. So regarding when the program started, the original idea for the program started in 2012 when there were two families that had, their children were at the latter stages of their educational year, and they were starting to look around for adult programs, and they weren't finding anything that they thought was fitting their needs. So they put their heads together and started to raise, rattle some sabers and like really get some support and start to raise funds to start this project where there's a completely community-based program for adults in the autism spectrum with a focus on independent living across a number of different outcomes. The idea was pitched to the university and accepted to the university in the year of 2016. And our executive director, Dr. Christopher Manente, was hired that same year. And the SCALE program accepted its first participant in 2017. So very new. Everything that we're doing here is new, and we're still breaking new ground, and we're forging new inroads into how we go about doing this, learning along the way as well. But we're doing so in a way that we're staying very true to our values of individualized supports in community-based settings for any type of individual on the autism spectrum.
All right. The next question is, does SCALE have on-campus living? If so, are the rooms separate from the other general dorms?
Presently, there is not a residential program related to the RCAAS. It was something that is in the works, but it's not there. There's a lot of different things that are going into that. Above my understanding, even Rutgers is a very large organization. There's a whole lot of things related to, providing a residential placement. So at this time, short answer, there's nothing at this time residential. But if there were to be something residential, it would likely be residences exclusively for adults on the autism spectrum with supports if needed for that individual.
Okay, looks like that's all the questions that I see on my screen. Does anyone else have any questions? People are starting to say thank you. It was very informative. Someone did just ask, will there be transportation through the DDD, and how far away will they go?
So the DDD, there are different transportation providers. transportation continues to be a barrier for a lot of folks. We are presently, while we're an approved provider of transportation, we don't have vehicles, nor are we a day program in the traditional sense, in that we're like a day habilitation program. So we're not mandated to provide it. But we've worked with some external transportation companies and been successful. But it's also, not only is it a barrier just like in finding the transportation services, but also from a budgetary standpoint, it's a very expensive addition to a budget. So while we are still hoping to work and find more sustainable options for transportation, I don't know of anything formal that the state is doing other than just approving providers to do that. But the RCAAS at this time is not a provider of transportation.
How do the staff handle when or if there is a meltdown or anxiety?
So yeah, it depends on the individual. We try to, for individuals that have behaviors that could result in like a meltdown or maybe something that's potentially problematic in a community-based setting. It starts off from us educating people. So we work very closely with the Rutgers University Police Department and first responders, and we try to raise awareness on the campus. But there's a lot of people that don't know what's going on campus with relation to what we're doing. But we start off by educating the first responders, because sometimes as an ABA program that is hands-on at times, if individuals are engaging in problem behaviors that could lead to harm to themselves or others, or they're destroying property that could lead to harm, we may utilize physical strategies to de-escalate the situation in the form of a restraint. But we try to avoid doing that at all costs, and it doesn't occur that much within the SCALE program. We typically have very informed behavioral intervention programs that are based on functional analysis of behavior and a bunch of other methods for evaluating, so we can develop antecedent-based strategies to reduce the likelihood that those behaviors could occur. But in the event that they do occur, we may utilize hands-on strategies, like I said, to reduce them. For folks that maybe just have anxieties or maybe like specific to that individual, we would identify what potential triggers are and try to minimize the effects of those triggers by planning as much as possible, allowing for transitions and practicing those transitions, not just throwing a person into an unfamiliar or uncomfortable circumstance. We would practice those transitions in more controlled settings first, maybe in our community center, maybe somewhere on the Douglas campus where our community center is. So if it does lead to a meltdown, we're at least close to a home base where we can keep the person and those supporting that person safe. So that's a very individualized approach that we take to each person, depending on the presentation of their problem behavior, the risk that it presents, and the input of the family members and the support folks that are on that person's team.
Okay. Well, on behalf of the Ocean County Library, we want to thank Dr. Maraventano for sharing your time and knowledge with our community. We also want to thank our audience members for participating and attending the program. We hope that you've found it useful. For more information about the library's Autism Resources Fair, go to theoceancountylibrary.org/autism/fair. And thank you again, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
I really
you.
I appreciate the time, and please feel free to reach out to me to any of those links that I sent, and consider signing up for that webinar that I'll be conducting in a few weeks.
Support public libraries. Like, share, and subscribe for more great videos.